T-minus 15 minutes and counting. T-minus 15 minutes and counting.
That's the announcement from Mercury Control. This is Walter Cronkite back at the CBS News Control Center at Cape Canaveral. 15 minutes to go before blast-off for John Glenn. And the weather is perfect here at Cape Canaveral. A wind of around 15 knots, which is just about maximum for a permissible, safe flight. But that doesn't seem to be giving anybody any worries. There are no clouds in the sky at all at this time from horizon to horizon here at Cape Canaveral. And the reports from the recovery areas at sea is that the seas are gentle, the winds are gentle, and the skies are clear. Barring most unforeseen circumstances now, it seems that John Glenn will get his much-delayed flight into space and 3 times around this Earth of ours in the next 15 minutes. So at that time, an announcement from Mercury Control that I wanted to catch, but it was a routine announcement here on the beach at Cocoa Beach. There are now, they said, almost 50,000 persons again. They've been brought out from scores of miles around Cocoa Beach by the television reports of the launch and its progression toward a blast-off, which would come now in 17 and a half minutes. Correction, 13 and a half minutes. 13 and a half minutes to launch time. The crowds on the beach there are getting their information by radio and television, even as you are. They're several miles from the actual launch site, and they have no direct information other than that they get through these public systems such as our CBS News television broadcast this morning. John Glenn, in now some 13 minutes from now, will be experiencing something like 8 times his own weight, 8G force, as he rockets into space. The helicopters are warming up. They will begin hovering over the coastal area in case at launch time there has to be a quick abort. And John Glenn is parachuted back into the sea off Cape Canaveral itself. He'll undergo 8 Gs, 8 times his own weight, a force that almost denies him the power of speech. You may hear a little later on this morning his strained voice as we get a repeat of the information back to Mercury Control. We hope to have that during the orbited flight. He'll experience an outside temperature of minus 450 degrees as his capsule within 5 minutes reaches the outer space, the fringes of outer space, and begins its orbit of the Earth. And later on, 3,000 degrees will be the heat of that capsule's heat pad as it re-enters the atmosphere of the Earth. John Glenn, 40 years old, father of 2, oldest of the astronauts, and most experienced in combat in both World War II and Korea, a man who set the first jet record for a crossing of the United States several years ago. He stands by at T-minus 11:30 for his rendezvous with destiny in outer space. He sits in that bell-shaped capsule, 9 feet high, 6 feet wide, lying on his back in a specially prepared fiberglass couch. There is the fire rescue crew, which can help retrieve Glenn if necessary in a launch accident. It's T-minus 11 minutes now and counting. T-minus 11. He sits atop 27,000 gallons there of highly volatile and explosive fuel aboard a rocket that generates some 360,000 pounds of thrust that will rocket him at a speed of 17,500 miles an hour around the Earth. T-minus 10 minutes and 30 seconds and counting. All systems go. Pilot, capsule, the booster, go. The tracking stations, go. The recovery forces, go. As we get to T minus 10 minutes, here's an announcement from Mercury Control.
The MA6 countdown is at T minus 10 minutes and counting. Mercury astronaut John Glenn is reporting all the systems in the spacecraft are go. Our status report in the control center indicates all systems are go. This is Mercury Control at T minus 9 minutes and 45 seconds.
It's coming up to 9 minutes and 30 seconds. 9 minutes and 30 seconds until John Glenn launches off from this pad here at Cape Canaveral. He will, if he makes a successful entry into orbit, one that is exactly the right speed so that he will not drop back into the atmosphere at some unforeseen spot in his orbit, one that's in exactly the right trajectory so he will not be carried over areas of the Earth that are not prepared to monitor his passage and to receive him if he comes back to Earth. A launch that is perfect in its apogee and its perigee and the height and the depth of its orbit. He will go into orbit if all those things are perfect. It's T minus 8 minutes and 50 seconds now and counting. With the weather perfect, all systems go. That flight of his will take him back and forth across the equator at a height of 100 to 150 miles. Each orbit will pass twice from summer to winter as he crosses that equator. He'll go from night to day twice, too. It's T minus 8 minutes and 30 seconds and counting. He sits in that fiberglass couch now, specially tailored to his body. A couch with a special aluminum webbing underneath it to take the shock of landing and the shock of the gravity force as he blasts off and comes back to the atmosphere. It's T minus 8 minutes and counting. The capsule itself weighs 4,200 pounds at launch. That's just a little over 2 tons. $5 million worth of it. Pressurized, heated, and cooled against the minus 450 degrees of space and the 3,000 degrees of re-entry. And it's now 7 minutes and 30 seconds and counting. He has windows from which he can observe the Earth going around underneath him, from which he can observe the stars, which is a major part of the reason for man in space. He will be controlling his own capsule in its attitude, that is, in its yaw, its sideward motion, but not in its actual direction. And it's T minus 7 minutes and counting. The space capsule is equipped with 3 parachutes. A drogue chute that opens at some 40,000 feet to slow him down, and then the big canopy that will let him gently. Here's an announcement for control.
Launch countdown is at 6 minutes and 40 seconds and counting. 6 minutes and 40 seconds and counting.
And it's coming up to 6 minutes and 30 seconds now and counting. Has the parachutes, he has a raft, neatly packaged in that little capsule, hardly the size of a telephone booth. A raft to which he can take if he lands in the Indian Ocean or the Atlantic or the Pacific, far removed from any of the rescue forces at sea. Maximum period to get rescue forces through him has been estimated at 18 hours. And it's now T minus 6 minutes. 6 minutes to blast off.
This is Mercury Control. The MA6 launch countdown is at T minus 6 minutes and 30 seconds. T minus 6 minutes and 30 seconds. We have encountered an electrical power failure in connection with our computers in Bermuda. The power has been restored. We estimate it will take us about 5 minutes to get the computer back into condition to support the mission. We're at T minus 6 minutes and 30 seconds and holding. We estimate this hold will last about 5 minutes.
You heard the announcement from Mercury Control of a hold at 6.5 minutes before launch time. A hold that came at 9:30. Here at our CBS News Control Center on Cape Canaveral, we can look across the scrub of this peninsula that juts out from the Atlantic coast of central Florida at the rocket standing there majestically alone, except for the escape tower alongside. That tower is unmanned. There are no living beings in the immediate area of the rocket now, except for Glenn himself sitting there atop the 67-foot rocket. The entire height of the rocket and the capsule and the 16-foot escape tower being some 93 feet. That tower that you see alongside stays alongside till about 35 seconds before launch, when the umbilical cords, that is the cords supplying the ground support system, are dropped away. The towers move back. At Grand Central Station in New York, the crowds of commuters and shoppers watch our Mercury Control CBS News and announcement.
The MA6 launch countdown is at T-minus 6 minutes and 30 seconds, and the countdown has been picked up. T-minus 6 minutes and 30 seconds and counting. This is Mercury Control.
That was barely a 2-minute delay. The count is T-minus 6:30 and counting. And assuming that they picked up that count, which we're not sure of, right at clock time, it's now T-minus 6 and counting. Powers did not give us the time that the countdown actually was resumed. Sometimes there is a short delay in the announcement from Mercury Control. We would calculate that the countdown was resumed because that's the way they like to do things, on the exact minute or half minute. In Mercury Control was resumed at 9:41, so that makes it T-minus 5:30 now. 5.5 minutes to launch time. 9:41, the count was resumed. It should be coming up on T-minus 5 minutes in about 5 seconds, and we expect an announcement from Mercury Control at that time. We'll be standing by for that announcement.
Mercury Control, the MA6 launch countdown is at T-minus 5 minutes and counting. T-minus 5 minutes and counting. Mercury Control.
The last 5 minutes of this countdown is on. All conditions go. 15,000 persons in the recovery forces standing by. Another 500 in the tracking forces standing by. A press corps of 500. And we of television and radio standing by. And atop that rocket, Colonel John Glenn standing by. He is at this point actually working. He's not just lying there. In these 5 minutes, there are many checks to go through. He's being called on for information that he reads from his dials, a check against the automatic instruments that also record in Mercury Control. It's T-minus 4 and counting now. 4 minutes to launch. He's checking out communications facilities. He's checking out his pressurized suit. The biosensors, the 3 sensors on his body that report his body temperature, his respiration, and so on, they are reporting back. He is being told that everything is in go condition at 3.5 minutes before launch. It's T-minus 3:30 and counting. At T-minus 35 seconds, which is just about 3 minutes from now, you will see the tower there, the escape tower, which Glenn could use up to that time, pull away, the umbilical cord drop away, and that will mean 35 seconds to launch time. And then at launch, you'll see this capsule is 3 minutes now, 3 minutes, T-minus 3 and counting. You'll see this capsule atop that rocket rise very slowly at first. It should, in approximately 25 to 30 seconds, pitch over. You should see it definitely take a turn downward from the precise 90-degree vertical from which it will rise from the pad. And then in 2.5 minutes or so, the great rocket engines, 2 of them will drop away. It's T-minus 30 and counting.
Launch countdown is at 2 minutes and 30 seconds and counting. 2 minutes and 30 seconds and counting. This is Mercury Control.
I don't know any words for this except the trite ones. Tension is mounting here at Cape Canaveral. We've heard that phrase so many times before, but I don't know any circumstance to which it applies quite like this. If there's any man on this Cape at this moment that is not feeling the anxiety for Colonel Glenn as we go into 1 minute and 50 seconds before the launch time, I'll be very much surprised. 1 minute 45 seconds now. And the countdown is proceeding. The weather is perfect at Cape Canaveral. The weather is absolutely perfect here and downrange. There's plenty of time. It's 1 minute and 30 seconds now. Plenty of time for the 3 orbits. Should be pointed out that John Glenn can be brought back at the end of either the first or second orbit if for any reason it is thought that's necessary. 1 minute and 15 seconds now. 1 minute and 10 seconds. It is possible that he would not go into orbit at all. If that is chosen after he gets up over Bermuda, he can be brought back safely. 1 minute.
MA6 launch countdown is T-minus 1 minute and counting. T-minus 1 minute and counting. All systems are reported in a go condition. John Glenn reports he is ready. This is Mercury Control.
And now it's 45 seconds. And now it's 35 seconds. 30 seconds.
This is Mercury Control. The MA6 count T-minus 30 and counting. T-minus 30 seconds and counting.
It's a few seconds late. It's 20 seconds now.
The Mercury spacecraft umbilical is out. We're at T-minus 19 seconds. T-minus 10 seconds counting. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff.
Contrails of jet fighter craft that are following this first stage of flight.
MA6 vehicle is climbing nicely, has passed through the area of maximum dynamic pressures. Pilot John Glenn is reporting all systems go, is giving routine reports, reading off his instruments. John Glenn reports the flight very smooth now.
burst of contrail you see there is as the rocket, the MA6, clears the atmosphere.
Proceeding on its pre-planned trajectory.
It's on target, on trajectory.
John Glenn reports his cabin pressure now holding at 6.1 pounds per square inch.
All reports from Mercury Control sound good.
The vehicle is still climbing on its trajectory. John Glenn reports the G-forces building now to 6. Booster engine cutoff has been confirmed by the pilot. Telemetry indications in the Mercury Control Center have confirmed booster engine staging. The pilot has confirmed booster engine staging.
That means that the two big booster engines that got Glenn off the pad have now dropped away.
Reports that the escape tower has separated. Our telemetry in the Mercury Control Center confirms that the tower has separated.
That's the escape tower that Glenn no longer needs. He can bring that capsule back safely from the height he has reached now, which is about 100 miles. He's now nearly 500 miles downrange, nearly 100 miles.
The is now climbing on its trajectory. 3 minutes and 5 seconds of flight time. It is flying on its pre-planned trajectory. The pilot reports that the G-forces are building up once again under the acceleration of the sustainer engine. Bermuda reports that it has acquired telemetry signals from the spacecraft. John Glenn reports everything looks good.
You saw his nurse, Dee O'Hara, there as she happily watched this launch, as we all did. A most successful launch. In another minute now, Glenn will reach the next critical stage, which is whether he will make this orbit or not. According, though, to Power's announcements from Mercury Control, if the trajectory is proper,
is climbing nicely on its trajectory. John Glenn reports his fuel system as planned. His oxygen system is all okay. He reports his electrical power all okay.
If this trajectory is as good as it appears,
The station reports it has a valid track on the MA6 vehicle.
then apparently Glenn will go into orbit. That critical stage will be reached in another 30 seconds. At that time,
John Glenn reports his cabin pressure holding at 5.8 pounds per square inch.
at that moment, going into orbit through the keyhole, the directors here have 20 seconds to determine that the orbit is correct, or they order Glenn back.
John Glenn reports all systems are go. The MA6 vehicle is approaching its sustainer engine cutoff point. John reports all systems in the spacecraft are go. The flight trajectory still looks good.
He should be over Bermuda now.
We have a report from the Mercury spacecraft that the sustainer engine has cut off as planned. John Glenn reports 0G and I feel fine. He says the view is tremendous.
He's got clear weather to look at the Atlantic. He can see all the way up the
Glenn reports he could see the booster turning around behind him. He advised that he thought the sight of the booster falling away behind him was a beautiful sight to see.
The booster will follow the spacecraft through all three of its orbits, growing a slight distance further
John
away.
Glenn reports he can see a very large cloud pattern clear back toward Cape Canaveral and says it's a beautiful sight.
We should have a report.
Astronaut John Glenn now reports his spacecraft has turned around. The blunt heat shield is facing the direction of flight and is tilted up about 34 degrees above horizontal. This is the desired pre-planned orbital attitude. All indications here are that we will be able to confirm orbit within a matter of a couple of minutes. This is Mercury
announcement we wait for. Obviously, the men in Mercury control themselves know at this time pretty definitely that an orbit has taken place, but they will confirm it to us, as you heard, in a couple of minutes. They have only a few seconds, actually, to make a choice on whether to continue to go after the orbit attitude has been assumed, because after that, if they desire to bring him back, he would land on the continent of Africa. And while the spacecraft is perfectly capable of landing on ground, the landing would be rather hard, and they prefer to land at sea. Furthermore, they don't particularly care for the thought of having to search out the spacecraft in the vast reaches of the African continent. Although, with the equipment they have available, they can pinpoint within a very short distance, within perhaps a mile, the actual landing position.
I'd like to confirm the liftoff time as 9:47 a.m. Eastern Standard Time at Cape Canaveral. Liftoff time 9:47 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The Friendship 7 spacecraft, its pilot John Glenn, is now in contact with Bermuda. This is Mercury Control.
9:47 a.m. was the liftoff time. Our countdown, Mercury Control's countdown, had proceeded to a 9:45 liftoff, where we slipped 2 minutes. This correspondent is a little bit unable to report. Perhaps John Powers, Colonel Powers in Mercury Control, will clarify that 2-minute slippage for us later on in the morning. It certainly is unimportant at this time. The important thing now is John Glenn in a successful orbit or not? That orbit must be absolutely perfect. The tolerances are very, very thin. They're not quite, not the same situation as launching Shepard and Grissom, for instance, because there a small error on a 15-minute flight is hardly to be reckoned, and it could be almost certain that they could be found and recovered. But on this flight, a very small error in direction or in speed at the liftoff would be magnified thousands of times in these 81,000 miles around the Earth, and could throw the entire orbit off. We expect to hear Glenn's voice shortly from T-minus 10 on. His voice is being recorded in Mercury Control and will occasionally be played back to us as these orbits go on. That will be the choice of the Mercury project directors, whether they will make that possible for us or not. That is to protect Glenn so that he need not be thinking about being on the air all the time and can concentrate on his own reports, his scientific reports. As you see here, we have a animation, a drawing of what Glenn is watching at this time in the capsule.
Roger, EPI is started.
He is reporting. We're expecting to hear John Glenn's voice very shortly now. It will be picking up his voice at T-minus.
Roger, scope is retracting. The scope is retracted, light is out.
That's John Glenn.
Roger, we show solid TM on scope retract. Roger.
Mercury Control had a little trouble with their tape and feeding it back to us. That's not the way John Glenn sounded on liftoff. That was a tape being speeded up as it was played back for us, the American audience, and we will undoubtedly have that tape re-racked and hear more of it a little later on. The animation you see is John Glenn, or an astronaut, represented in the Mercury capsule. He's got that big clock that tells him the seconds since liftoff. That is so that at precise seconds and minutes throughout this 4 hours and 50 minutes that he'll be up there for 3 orbits, he can perform the functions requested of him. He will be a very busy man during these 4 hours and 50 minutes. This is no joyride for him. He has many specific functions to perform. Besides looking at all those dials and reporting back to Mercury Control through the vast network of 18 tracking stations around the world, he must report on his own health and conditions, his own reactions, his reactions to weightlessness.
This is Mercury Control. I have the figures on the cutoff conditions, that is the engine cutoff conditions on the MA6 vehicle, and the orbital velocity and insertion details. Atlas 109D, carrying the Friendship 7 spacecraft, cut its final engine off approximately 503 miles east of Cape Canaveral at an altitude of approximately 100 miles. Its velocity at that time was approximately 17,500 miles. That means that the orbit of the Friendship 7 spacecraft will vary from a low altitude of about 100 miles to a peak altitude of about 160 miles. We estimate at this time that the period of the orbit will be approximately 89 minutes. All of these numbers will undoubtedly be clarified somewhat as we get more data on the orbit. Under current conditions, John Glenn in the Friendship 7 spacecraft is traveling at a velocity of 17,545 miles an hour and is in an orbit ranging from 100 miles at the perigee or low point to an altitude of 160 miles at its apogee or high point. At this time, we have the tape recording of John Glenn's voice as he lifted off from Cape Canaveral and flew the first 6 or 7 minutes of his flight. This is Mercury Control standing by while you hear this tape. 1
Colonel John Glenn's voice from space. An achievement that sends shivers up and down this reporter's spine as we hear such a clear report from a man hurtling around this earth 100 miles above the surface of the earth at 17,500 miles an hour. This, at our CBS News Control Center, is an exact replica of the Earth and the Mercury capsule passing over it, timed to coincide with the actual progress of that Mercury capsule. We'll be coming back to it from time to time. That is where John Glenn is at this moment. He is over the African continent. He passed over the Canaries just a moment ago and is just about to come in contact with at 22 minutes after liftoff, which was at 9:47. He should come in contact with the Kano tracking station. That's in the heart of Africa in Nigeria. On this orbit, he will pass south of the Kano station and on out across the Indian Ocean again, crossing over the northern point of Mozambique, fourth largest of the world's islands. The simulation you see here is a representation of what he has seen in his capsule, timed to the moment of the takeoff. He has actually seen, as you're seeing there, a clock like that clock ticking off the seconds. At 22 minutes, he will be reporting into Kano tracking station some 37 seconds from now. Here's where you see these tracking stations, the Canary Island station that he was over a moment ago and presumably reported successfully into. We have not had a report from Mercury Control as to that. The Atlantic Ship Station, which lies off the bulge of Africa, down not too far north of the equator. That is primarily for tracking his second and third orbits, which would be south of the first orbit. He's now approaching the range of that Kano station. We expect to have Powers' voice again now from Mercury Control here. Colonel Powers, astronaut spokesman. Liftoff and up into the position of orbit, he said he confirmed the report from Mercury Control. And incidentally, that other voice you heard was Navy Commander Alan Shepard, America's first man into space. He is what is called CAPCOM, Capsule Communicator. He is at Mercury Control, and he is the man who, when Glenn is overhead, will be in contact with him. Glenn also will be talking to others of the astronauts who are at positions around the world. After he gets into the range of Australia, you'll be hearing the voice of Captain Walker Cooper, the youngest of the astronauts. Glenn is the oldest at 40. Then a little later on, he'll be picking up the voice of Walter Schirra, who is at Point Aguila, California, and then again Shepard's voice. He also might be in communication with the second American into space, Gus Grissom, who is at Bermuda. Grissom had an important function because if this orbit had been incorrect, Grissom would have had part of the responsibility for bringing Glenn back before going into orbit. As the orbit had been such as to carry him down, dipping into the atmosphere where the heat of friction might have caused serious difficulties, or was so high as to send him dashing out into space further than the orbit that is permitted, well, he would have had to have been brought back. That has not happened, and now he has passed over the Kano station and is moving on toward the coast of Africa now. He's getting over the northern part of the Congo at this time. You also heard Alan Shepard say, as I started to tell you a moment ago when I got off on telling you that was Alan Shepard's voice, Alan Shepard said, Mercury Control confirms 7 orbits okay, 7 orbits okay. That does not mean that Glenn is about to go 7 orbits, but 7 orbits has been considered the minimum requirement for safety. In other words, the orbit that he went into is capable of sustaining 7 orbits, a minimum of 7 orbits, before the perigee, the lowest point of the orbit, the flight, might bring him back into the atmosphere. So he's going to have, after his 3 orbits, a margin of 4 if he felt it were necessary for any reason to take them, although that is not the consideration. The consideration is merely that if there are 7 clear orbits, then certainly the 3 will be perfectly safe. Actually, it may be that there are many more than 7 orbits possible on this flight. It is just that the computing equipment only goes out to a number of digits that can compute 7 orbits. They can feed in more, but they didn't feel it necessary. You see the position of the spacecraft now as he is approaching the darkness of the Indian Ocean. He's not only approaching darkness, but he's approaching summer. As he gets toward the equator there, he passes from winter into the summer of the southern latitudes. He also passes at this point, as he crosses the coast of Africa, into night. It is nighttime of Tuesday, and it will be a passage through night until he comes up on something that looks like dawn to him of what to him would be Wednesday, having passed through Tuesday night, but because at that point out in the Pacific he'll be crossing the international date line, it will go back to Tuesday. You'll actually see 3 dawns on this flight and 3 nightfalls. Another announcement from Mercury Control is coming up shortly, I'm advised. You see, he's been in flight now 27 minutes and 24 seconds. The last report we had, everything functioning normally as he passed over Kano, tracking station in Nigeria. That may be the announcement we get from Mercury Control.
Bus is now ready to leave the coast. Bus is now ready to leave the coast. We'll be leaving in 5 minutes.
I don't assume that announcement that the press bus is about to leave the Cape is the announcement that we're waiting for Mercury. Here it is.
All information will be originating from here at the press site. At the present time, I told you here differently.
No, that's not the announcement. Those are logistical announcements for the 500 members of the press, from some 48 foreign correspondents included among them, who now, most of them will leave the press site perhaps and go back into Cocoa Beach, follow the progress of Glenn as you're following it on CBS television. You will note that Alan Shepard also heard from Glenn, as we heard a moment ago, that his flight was quite bumpy. He said he went through a severe vibration area during the liftoff phase. That's something that Alan Shepard himself experienced, and they thought they had eliminated the difficulty. Grissom did not have that in his flight. It was believed to be in the separation ring, the clamp ring, between the capsule and the booster that had caused that vibration and severe bumpiness in the Shepard flight. The matter was corrected on Grissom's rocket. It believed to have been corrected on Glenn's, but apparently he suffered some of that discomfort of vibration. We're still waiting for that announcement from Mercury Control that they warned us of a couple of minutes ago. Glenn announced that he was suffering some oscillation.
Mercury Control. The Friendship spacecraft, Friendship 7, is in orbit with John Glenn at the controls. Contact was made with our tracking station in Kano at 9 minutes after 10 Eastern Standard Time. At the time of engine cutoff, the Atlas launch vehicle was approximately 503 statute miles away from its launch pad at Cape Canaveral. It was at an altitude of 100 miles. It was traveling at a speed of 17,530 miles. So the orbital details are the perigee, or low point, about 100 miles. The apogee, or high point, about 160 miles. The speed of the Friendship 7 spacecraft is now 17,545 miles per hour. All information we have as of this time indicates the mission is proceeding as planned. And this is Mercury Control.
The one fact that Colonel Powers did not give us there that he gave us earlier is that with this orbit at this speed, the orbiting time should be 89 minutes. 89 minutes for a complete circle of the Earth. In the 3 orbits that it now seems clear John Glenn is destined to complete unless something does go wrong up there. And we must remember that something did go wrong in the last orbited flight, American orbited flight with the chimpanzee Enos aboard. Unless something like that happens, Glenn will make 3 orbits, return to Earth 4 minutes and 50 seconds, 4 hours and 50 minutes after takeoff, which would put his return at about 1:35. Through our slow motion facilities with videotape, let us take a look now at the launch of John Glenn's capsule and rocket in slow motion. You see there the 2 booster engines and the sustainer engine that are uniquely in the Atlas fire simultaneously. Why the Atlas called a 1.5 stage engine instead of a 2-stage. The 2-stage engine would fire the second stage after the first stage had burned out. But these fire simultaneously so that the chances of error in firing are eliminated. This is a videotape in slow motion of the takeoff. The 2 little fires along the side there, you see, are the rocket, vernier rockets. Here's Glenn's voice.
Sequence panel positions are normally set. Landing tag is off. Are you receiving? Over. I understand. We have telemetry solid. Roger. You have telemetry solid. And total fuel is 9098. I repeat, 9098. Understand automatic fuel is 9098. So that is affirmative. Attitude. Low 0 yaw 2 degrees right. Pitch 33 degrees. Rates are all indicating 0. I am on ASCS at present time. The clock is still set for time to retrograde time of 04 plus 32 plus 28. I have retrograde times okay from Bermuda. Cabin pressure holding steady at 5.7. Cabin air 9.0. Relative humidity 3.0. Coolant quantity is 6.8. Suit environment is 6.5. Cabin pressure, suit pressure is indicating 5.8. Steam temperature 6.0 on the suit. I am very comfortable, however. I don't want to turn it down just yet. Primary oxygen is...
Mercury Control did not advise us as to what point that recording was made. That was Glenn's voice, audio tape recording of his voice as he reported sometime perhaps over the eastern Atlantic Ocean.
The relayed broadcast of John Glenn's voice as received by the Canaries and Bermuda, and then transmitted back here to the Mercury Control Center. This tape
tape. We'll get to hear that tape again. We'll hear that tape again, but as you heard, it was made.
Craft is in contact with our traffic station at Zanzibar. Contact was made at 1:08 after the hour, 10:18 Eastern Standard Time. Stand by now for the tape.
Glenn is now over the eastern coast of Africa, Zanzibar, Mozambique, heading out over the Indian Ocean. It's summer now in the southern latitudes. He's crossed the equator. And it's nighttime. We'll hear that earlier tape made over the Canary Islands as he was leaving the eastern Atlantic and heading out over the continent of Africa. We'll hear it repeated over the public address system here in just a moment. That's the actual time you see there in that animation. He's now been up 35 minutes and 17 seconds.
The telemetry low frequency is on. Rescue aids are on automatic. Jettison tower and SEP capsule lights are out. The pressure regulator is still in the in position. Launch control is on. Sequence panel positions are normally set. Landing bag is off. Are you receiving? Over. Roger. Understand. We have telemetry solid. Roger. You have telemetry solid. Control fuel is 9098. I repeat, 9098. Understand, automatic fuel is 9098. So that is affirmative. Attitude. Roll 0, yaw, 2 degrees right. Pitch 33 degrees. Rates are all indicating 0. I am on ASCS at present time. The clock is still set for time to retrograde time of 04 plus 32 plus 28. I have retrograde times okay from Bermuda. Cabin pressure holding steady at 5.7. Cabin air 9.0. Relative humidity 3.0. Coolant quantity is 6.8. Suit environment is 6.5. Cabin pressure, suit pressure is indicating 5.8. Steam temperature 6.0 on the suit. I am very comfortable, however. I don't want to turn it down just yet. Primary oxygen is 7.8. Secondary 102. Main bus is 2.4. Number 1 is 2.5. 2.5. 2.5. Standby 1 is 2.6. Standby 2 is 2.5. Isolated 2.9 and back on main. Ammeters indicating 2.3. ASCS is 112. Fans are 112. Over. Understand. Your retro sequence time is 043228. Over. That is affirmative. That's what's set in the clock. The horizon is a brilliant blue. There, I have the mainland in sight at present time, coming up on the scope, and have Canaries in sight out through the window, and picked them up on the scope just before I saw them out the window. Over. Roger. Bishop said, Mr. Canary Capcom, repeat blood pressure check.
That was John Glenn's voice as he was crossing the Canary Islands, approaching the coast of Africa. That was about 15 minutes ago. Since then, he's crossed the entire continent of Africa. He's out over the Indian Ocean and is within a couple of minutes of contacting the Indian Ocean tracking station out in the center of the Indian Ocean. We'll be back for more live coverage in just a moment. launch of John Glenn into orbit. This is Walter Cronkite reporting. He's now out over the Indian Ocean, as you see on a representation there of the globe, with the timed flight of his Mercury capsule. He's passed over the northern side of the island of Madagascar. Malagasy it's called now.
This is Mercury Control. Our indication
He's
from
in the area at the moment.
now are that John Glenn and his Friendship 7 spacecraft have passed out into the Indian Ocean. He's now flying over the Indian Ocean, approaching our Indian Ocean ship. A report I have here from our Kano station indicates the astronaut's status is go. He sounds like he is in excellent voice. His heart action is excellent. And we have an indication that he did his first eating as he passed over Kano. He has performed a yaw maneuver and has exercised the manual control systems. As of this time in the Friendship 7 flight, the spacecraft is approaching the Indian Ocean ship. All systems indicate go at this time. This is Mercury Control.
Walter Cronkite back at our CBS News Control Center. That's Lieutenant Colonel John Shorty Powers, who'll be reporting to us from Mercury Control throughout this flight of John Glenn. A beautiful, beautiful launch. Everything has gone absolutely perfectly so far. Glenn is now just about to pass through an area which is one of the more difficult ones on the flight, an area where he is potentially out of contact, voice contact with the ground. For some 3 minutes there, from 38 minutes into flight to about 41 minutes into flight, he is potentially out of contact. Not necessarily so. It depends on atmospheric conditions. But now he has passed through that zone, and he is approaching a point north of the Indian Ocean tracking station. The U.S. Navy station on assignment to NASA with full monitoring equipment. It's a regular support station of the tracking operation, and it is there right in the middle of the Indian Ocean. Glenn is now in darkness. He is in darkness throughout the flight, in outer space, the darkness of outer space, but he is over a dark area of the world. It is nighttime there. The difference in time is some 8 to 9 hours difference in time. It's just about dusk below. While he travels through darkness, the earth below him is lighted by the sun or dark. As a matter of fact, on his second pass across the Indian Ocean ship, he's going to be looking for an experiment in ground visual control for future space flight. The Indian Ocean ship will fire to a 100,000-foot altitude a rocket that will let loose 200,000 candle power of light at its apogee at the height of the rocket's flight. They will try to see if Glenn can see it. It's one of the many functions he'll be performing during this flight. He has control over that space capsule in everything except its direction. He can turn it sideways, he can turn it up or down, and he can fire the retro rockets that are there in the front of the spacecraft as he's now flying. That would slow down his flight and bring him back into the Earth's atmosphere for a recovery operation. He has all of those capabilities. Besides those functions, he's going to be testing a lot of other things. For one thing, weightlessness. 4 hours and 50 minutes of it almost. This will be the longest experiment America has been able to conduct in weightlessness. We know only a little bit that the Russians have told us about Gagarin and German Titov's flights. Gagarin in one orbit and Titov on 13 orbits around the Earth. Orbits that... Here's John Powers.
Friendship 7 spacecraft with astronaut John Glenn at the controls is flying high over the Indian Ocean at this time. made initial contact with the Indian Ocean ship at 28 minutes after the hour, 10:28 Eastern Standard Time. All of our information here at this time indicates the flight is proceeding normally. All of our contacts with the pilot indicate that he is feeling fine. Our flight surgeon here in the control center, looking at data fed in from the control network, indicates the pilot is in a completely normal situation and proceeding in an excellent condition. This is Mercury Control with the Friendship 7 over the Indian Ocean ship at this time.
As we were saying, Titov, in his 24-hour orbit of the Earth, suffered some air or space sickness perhaps from the weightlessness. But the Russians haven't given us very much information about that, and we're anxious to get our own. It may be a key factor in determining what the future space pilots can endure, and also what steps may be needed so that they can carry on successful space navigation and exploration. John Glenn, as you heard Shorty Powers say a moment ago, has taken his first meal. That's a little bit ahead of schedule. It was thought that he might take that on the second orbit over the Indian Ocean. Instead, he tried it on the first. It's a huge toothpaste tube designed partly by B. Finkelstein of the Wright-Patterson Space Laboratories at Dayton, Ohio, who is here at Cape Canaveral and is in charge of the astronauts' diet. Well, this is a large thing like a toothpaste tube that has a sort of a gun attachment that forces the substance, which is like the consistency of baby food, out through a large-size nipple at the end of the tube. Because of the weightless situation, you see, there would be no way to keep food on a fork or in any other way eat in outer space. So this is one of the experiments that John Glenn is conducting out there, seeing how well this tube works in a state of weightlessness. Weightlessness is the one condition that we have not learned how to duplicate on Earth. There was a scientific breakthrough when we learned how to create a vacuum. Another breakthrough would be learning how to defy the laws of gravity and create weightlessness. This cannot be done only, it can be accomplished only over any duration, anything more than a few seconds at a time, by flight in space. So this is one of the valuable things we'll learn with a man out there. John Glenn, in this state of weightlessness, at some point through this flight, has a large thing that looks like a oversized, a jumbo-sized rubber band, a huge band like an inner tube cut in two. He will exercise with that, pull on it a few times, and then take his blood pressure to see if the weightless state in doing manual work has any effect. Also, an important part of this flight will be to observe the stars. It's dark out there, as we've said before, in outer space throughout. With the sun having nothing to reflect off of, there's no effect of sunlight in outer space. But John Glenn, of course, can see a lighted area of Earth. He can tell whether it's night or day below him. But out there, clear of the Earth's atmosphere, he has an unparalleled view of the stars. And there's not an astronomer alive who wouldn't give almost everything he has to be out there to get that look. Astronomers climb the highest mountains to get just a couple of miles outside the blanket of dirt and soot and just general atmospheric contamination that blankets our Earth, to get a closer look at the stars. And now here's John Glenn, free of that Earth's atmosphere. He's 100 miles up, and his observations of the stars after 3 years of intensive study of astronomy just for this purpose will be considered exceedingly valuable. Not only will be observing the stars just for the purpose of pure research, but also to see whether the stars can be used in space navigation, if he can orient himself with those stars. And now let's go to Washington, D.C., to the White House, and George Herman reporting. George? Here at the White House, President Kennedy is expected to walk from the executive mansion itself, the place where he lives, to his working quarters, his office here. The President watched the takeoff on television set this morning. We have some notes that Presidential News Secretary Pierre Salinger has given us. First of all, the President expressed himself as being very pleased at the initial success of these first stages of the flight. The way it went, the President and Mrs. Kennedy got up around 7:15 this morning and turned on their television sets, just like many other Americans. They watched from the President's bedroom until about 8:50, and the President went downstairs for his regular Tuesday morning breakfast with the legislative leaders. There was a small portable television set in the family dining room where they watched with the sound turned down until about 15 minutes before takeoff. Then the space agency called the President directly there. Pierre Salinger held the phone until about 5 minutes after the blast-off, and then they handed it over to the President, and the President was enabled through the telephone to listen to the voice of John Glenn coming directly from the Mercury capsule. They held the telephone at the Space Center up to a loudspeaker, and the President was able to listen. He listened for about 10 minutes, and then the President stayed on in the House watching the parts of the flight and getting the early reports, finding out that the orbit was all right and everything was under control. The legislative leaders then moved over here to the west executive end of the White House, but the President has stayed on in the mansion, and he is expected to cross shortly, but so far he's still staying in the executive mansion itself, waiting reports and having some conferences. He has two appointments waiting for him here, sort of stacked up in the presidential office, waiting for the President to come across, but so far he's still staying in his house, perhaps like other Americans glued to the television scene. Back now to Walter Cronkite at Cape Canaveral.
And John Glenn in the Friendship 7 space capsule is approaching the coast of Australia. He should be over Perth, Australia, in a very short while now. He doesn't go exactly over Perth. He's a little bit north of it, some 60 miles or so, over the tracking station of Mouchet, which is north of Australia, where Walker Cooper will be standing by. Now at 11:40, we're coming up on the first hour in just 8 minutes since liftoff. There it is, 51 minutes and 41 seconds. You see below that clock, ticking off the minutes since liftoff, you see the scope through which John Glenn can see the picture of what's passing below him. He has a view of almost 1,800 miles in either direction across there to the horizon at either side, and has an unparalleled view if the clouds aren't too thick. I hope you'll excuse a certain dishabille here in our CBS News Control Center, but it is indeed hot in Florida at this time of the year, and in our control center with the heat of all of our monitors and the equipment, well, we feel down to a sports shirt. Hope you will forgive. John Glenn approaching the coast of Australia. He is out of touch right at this moment again, possibly out of touch. There are 3 or 4 of these no-contact areas along his orbital path for voice transmission. This does not mean necessarily that he cannot be received, and the chances are very great that he is being, but under minimum conditions, they acknowledge a possibility that voice transmission may be difficult. That does not mean, however, that he's not being monitored. Every 6 seconds, a complete rundown of his position, his medical attitude, the performance of the spacecraft, the environmental control system, and the entire operation are monitored and fed back to every one of the instruments here at Mercury Control. It's an amazing system of communications that permits all of this to be relayed from these tracking stations, over 183 miles of network communications into the Goddard Space Center at Beltsville, Maryland, and then right back here to Cape Canaveral, where they're fed up on the board at Mercury Control, where every second of this flight will be monitored. Yes. It shouldn't be considered, because
because everything is going so well that this is still a 100% successful mission. Recovery is not the least part of such a mission, of course, and whether John Glenn completes 1 or 2 or 3 orbits, there's an announcement.
40. Astronaut John Glenn is now in voice contact with astronaut Gordon Cooper, who is the capsule communicator at Mouchet. In the conversation, John has indicated, "I'm doing real well up here. All systems are go. I'm having no problems at all." He described his sight. He talked about cloud cover after he passed over the coast of Africa and crossed the Indian Ocean. He reported a high haze layer on the night side of the world. The voice communications are being recorded at this time. They will be broadcast shortly after we pass on beyond Mouchet, Australia. This is Mercury Control.
So John Glenn is doing well as he crosses the coast of Australia. Out across the vast reaches of that sparsely settled land over areas where the average occupancy is only 2 persons to a square mile. Out over an area where the Aboriginal natives have never seen a white man, and few white men have ever seen them. He passes over his next control station at Woomera, which is right in the center of the Australian plains and desert area. That area of Woomera has been built as a missile launching center for the Western world. Australian, British, and American space efforts are being made there. It's one of the really few
Friendship 7 spacecraft is carrying on a conversation with astronaut Gordon Cooper at Mouchet, Australia, as he passes over the Australian continent. He has reported that he has observed very bright lights, and from his discussion with Gordon Cooper, we have assumed that he is observing the city of Perth, Australia. His message to Gordon Cooper was, "Thank everybody for turning them on," meaning, of course, the lights. Our tracking station at Woomera, Australia, reports contact with the spacecraft at 43 minutes after the hour, 10:43 Eastern Standard Time. This is Mercury Control.
The citizens of Perth had announced in advance that they were going to turn all of their lights on and hoped that astronaut Glenn could see them. And now the citizens of Perth have official thanks from 100 miles overhead from John Glenn, speeding along at 17,500 miles an hour, that he has seen the lights. He thanks them for turning them on. With all of the busy things he has to do in space, John Glenn, who certainly is a perfect gentleman, I think we would all agree if we have ever met one, takes time to thank the citizens of Perth. And they certainly must be proud of having shown him the lights of their city from his orbited flight around the Earth. Let's go now to St. Louis, Missouri, to the McDonnell Aircraft Plant and to Bernard Eisman. Bernie?
The men who built this capsule have followed just about every movement that John Glenn's had to make since the moment he entered it. This is a precise mock-up of the capsule that John Glenn is orbiting in, and in it sits Fred Sanders, who is the assistant project engineer on Project Mercury here at McDonnell, and who helped design it and build it and make it work. Fred, what were the very first things that John Glenn had to attend to from the moment he was locked in there? What were the first things he had to do?
The first thing, Bernie, after securing himself in his seat with his harness, he made a careful check of all the dials on the instrument panel to see that they were at the proper readings.
Which ones, for instance?
Well, for example, his oxygen system, which is the dials in the upper right-hand corner here. Having completed that check, he then flipped the launch control switch, indicating that he had completed this check. Right. Everything was satisfactory and that he was ready to be launched. At launch, then, the clock begins to run, telling the time from launch the time at which the retrograde rockets will fire and the time to go to the retrograde fire.
In other words, that gives him running time both coming into his orbital flight and then going out of it.
That is right.
Let's look down this right side of the panel, which is a jumble of dials and lights and switches and what have you. And why don't we run down from the top and tell us what each one does?
All right, Barry. The first one here tells the pressure of the atmosphere inside the cabin.
Right.
The next one, the temperature of the air in the cabin.
Right.
The relative humidity, the amount of fuel remaining in his control system, the temperature and pressure inside his suit.
Right.
The pressure of oxygen, the partial pressure of oxygen, and the amount of oxygen remaining in his two oxygen supply systems.
One the main tank and one the backup tank. Is that right?
That's correct.
Over here, I see lights that repeat these very same things. Would you explain that situation?
Yes, Bernie. There are actually three ways which the astronaut can be warned of a malfunction or an abnormal reading in any of his systems. One way, of course, is to notice the reading of these gauges, which we just pointed out. In addition to that, if an abnormal situation does occur, one of these warning lights will come on and tell him, or even if he doesn't see this light, there is an audio tone in his headset which will warn him.
So he can be warned by a signal that he hears that something is amiss. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
These switches, these large switches on the side here, this one that says retrojet and then retroman, what function do they serve? What does John Glenn have to do with them?
Well, the retro-jettison switch controls the electrical circuit which causes the jettisoning or dropping away of the retrograde package which holds the retrograde rockets on the large end of the capsule. The switch can be used to either turn off that circuit or to choose one of two fuses which are in the circuit. In case of a blown fuse, he can switch by means of moving this switch to the standby fuse.
Right, that's also in case the control from the earthbound control did not operate properly.
That is correct. He can manually perform those functions also.
Right. There's one switch that you hold in your left hand. Would you explain that switch to us, Fred?
Yes, Barry. The astronaut will have this switch held in his hand throughout the launch phase, and it has the capability, if moved, as I'll show here, by pressing the button on top, which unlocks it,
right,
and then moving it, that will cause the capsule to escape from the booster in the case of some malfunction of the booster.
That's what they've called their chicken switch, isn't it?
I believe it is known as that by some people, yes.
Thank you very much, Fred. Now back to Walter Cronkite at Cape Canaveral.
And just at this moment, John Glenn, according to his scheduled orbit, should be over Brisbane, Australia, on the eastern coast of Australia, as you see there, passing out into the Pacific Ocean area again toward New Caledonia. And we'll be back for more live coverage in just a moment. And John Glenn now, almost 3/4 of the way around the Earth, is approaching the islands of New Caledonia out in the Pacific. He's been up now for 1 hour and 4 minutes, 17 seconds, 18, 19 as his clock in the capsule. Even as you see that representation of it there is counting off the seconds just as we see them. Down below him, he's seeing that graph of what is passing below. From overhead, as he passed over Brisbane, Australia, in the early night hours in Brisbane, he could see far north, almost to the northern side of the Australian continent, down past Tasmania to the south down there, the little island that lies below the Australian continent. He's approaching now the international dateline too. He should be there in another 6 minutes or so. It's about 5 minutes now that he should be due there. At that time, he will suddenly move from late Wednesday night to Tuesday night. Expect an announcement from Mercury Control in just a moment. shortly he should be able to see the Fiji Islands, some 300 miles to the south of him. He's passing over an area of many islands well known to American sailors, Marines, his fellow Marines, and soldiers from World War II days. We've been told we have an announcement coming from Mercury Control we've been listening for.
Friendship 7 spacecraft with astronaut John Glenn at the controls has now passed east of the Australian continent. As he passed over Australia, he advised that he could not see the city of Woomera because he had a lot of clouds over the Australian continent. The Woomera tracking station has reported all aeromedical data received during the pass gives every indication that John Glenn is completely normal, and that includes his electrocardiogram, his respiration rate, and his blood pressure. Dr. Bill Douglas, the astronaut's flight surgeon, has just advised me that astronaut John Glenn has 2 tubes of specially prepared food aboard his spacecraft, one containing fruit and one containing meat. He also has malted milk tablets aboard. This is Mercury Control, the Friendship 7 spacecraft, now coming up in the Pacific Ocean, flying toward Hawaii. This is Mercury Control.
John Glenn should be over the international date line at 1:09:30, so he's now just 2 minutes and 2 seconds from the international date line, which is that line drawn through the Earth at a point to keep from confusing all of us by having the days run consecutively as you circle the Earth. Got to make up at some point, and that's how it is done. He's actually flying through Wednesday night, but when he crosses the international date line, he'll be back on Tuesday time, coming up to Tuesday morning. We're expecting another announcement from Mercury Control. Should be up in just a moment. At this moment,
Mercury Control, we have the tape recording of the remotely relayed voice contact between astronaut John Glenn and astronaut Gordon Cooper as the Friendship 7 spacecraft passed over Australia. We are prepared to play those tapes for you at this time. Stand by for the tape-recorded tape of astronaut John Glenn's conversation with Cooper. This is Mercury Control. We could have sent you right, over. Roger. You have time to send us a blood pressure reading, over. Roger. Goodbye. Roger. Whenever you're ready. Roger, I'm already sending it. Pick it up, over. Roger, have it in good shape. Roger, I do have a light insight on the ground, over. Roger, stay there, just off to your right there. That's affirmative. Just to my right, I can see a big pattern of light. Apparently right on the coast. I can see a outline of the town and a very bright light just to the south of it. Roger, that is Perth and Rockingham, you're saying that. Roger, the lights show up very well. Thank everybody for turning them on, will you? Roger, sure will, John. Right. On down farther to the south and inland, I can see more lights. There are actually four patterns in that area. And also coming into sight in the window now is another one, almost down under me. The lights are very clear from up here. Roger, sounds good. Some 17 minutes ago, as John Glenn passed over Australia, over Perth, the lights of the city, all the lights having been turned on to see if he could see them. He saw them and thanked the people of Perth, as you heard there. And the report that the doctors and scientists have been waiting for most anxiously came in that report to Woomera that after 1 hour and 10 minutes of flight, about 5 minutes of flight at that point, John Glenn had suffered no effects from weightlessness. You heard him report on his tests. He moved his head. He felt no effects. He has felt no nausea. And this is considered to be a very good sign indeed. Let's go now back to New York City for a moment, to Grand Central Station and to Doug Edwards.
Walter, as you were saying about an hour and 20 minutes ago, once in a while the cliche, the trite thing is the only thing that will fit it. And this is one of those times that I'm very proud to be an American. We had some 7,000 to 8,000 Americans here in Grand Central Terminal at liftoff time. All you could hear at that moment was your own voice coming in from Cape Canaveral. It was so quiet you could almost hear the old pin drop, and then
then when the liftoff came, there came a tremendous burst of applause and whistling and yelling, and everybody was, then about 5 minutes later it came again. And all the way through, the crowd has thinned out just a little bit, but it's still pretty tremendous. It's the greatest stationary crowd in all of Grand Central's history. One young chap walked up to me and said, "You fellas have really made monkeys out of them today." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "The Russians. I happen to know a couple at the United Nations. I was talking to them last night, and they almost admitted that they were being made monkeys of, and I'm sure when they see this tremendous show today, showing the world America in action, then they will admit that perhaps they are." Anyway, in Grand Central, this is no day to try to catch a train. Back to Cape Canaveral.
Doug, you say it's a heartwarming day to be an American. I got an interesting telegram here from Grand Rapids, Michigan. It was signed simply an adopted daughter of these United States of America, but it said it so well. It said, "Who else in the entire world has offered the people the wonderful opportunity for simultaneously turning their hearts on?" And I take that to mean she is applauding the decision of the people in the United States government to make an open shot out of this, to let the whole people of the world see it happen.
Right you are. I think that goes for all of us here in Grand Central, too.
All right, Doug. And incidentally, speaking of the Russians as you were, just yesterday, Yuri Gagarin, who was the first of the Russian astronauts, the world's first spaceman, who made the first orbited flight, well, he was down in Cyprus on one of his tours, visiting in Nicosia, and he told newsmen there, which seemed to us here was just a little bit fatuous perhaps, that for me there was nothing good in the postponement of Glenn's flight after a 5-hour wait. He was talking about that January 27th postponement. He went on to say there is serious psychological and moral pressure exerted on him to sit in a rocket for 5 hours and wait any minute for launching must be terrible and unpleasant. Gagarin saying that as if nothing like that had happened to him. Well, maybe it didn't, but none of us believe because of the closed society in Russia that they have told us all the truth about their postponements and perhaps even some of their failures. Well, we'll be back for more on John Glenn's flight after a pause for station identification. CBS News Control Center here at Cape Canaveral, where we are now awaiting John Glenn's approach toward the western coast of the United States, San Diego. We are waiting to hear that the retro rockets are fired at 2. They should be fired at, 2 minutes from now, precisely. So they should be fired at 2:20. We should hear something about that time, about the firing of the retro rockets, which will begin the return of John Glenn's capsule to Earth. There was apparently a scare in Mercury Control just a short while ago. A report there that the telemetry indicator showed that the heat shield deployment switch was not working aboard the spacecraft. That would, if the heat shield did not deploy properly, it could result in a most serious catastrophe in the landing attempt. The heat shield must be deployed to help push away the 3,000 degrees of heat that are created by this one-ton space capsule coming back into the Earth's atmosphere at its high rate of speed as it descends, and without that deployment, matters could be quite serious for our space effort and for Colonel John Glenn. However, a report has now come from Hawaii that Hawaii checked with Glenn and the switch is working all right. Apparently it was only a signal malfunction and not the switch itself. So the concern has passed and everything seems to be in shape as John Glenn goes through his drill for the firing of the retro rockets. We're going out to San Diego to General Dynamics Astronautics there. Grant Holcomb, if you've got a report out there on the firing of the retro rockets, give it to us. If you haven't, get it back to us so we'll know, will you?
I certainly will, Walter, and let me say this, so far we have had no report of the retro rocket firing, but the antenna here on the roof at General Dynamics apparently just made contact. I don't know whether it made contact with the Atlas booster that is preceding Glenn's spacecraft or the spacecraft itself. Maybe we can get a quick answer here. Did you get the Atlas booster or is it the spacecraft?
We have the spacecraft.
They have the spacecraft in contact. According to the best information that we have been able to get, it would seem that the retro rockets have in all probability been fired before coming into this area. We cannot confirm that fact from this location.
Grant, we're going to take it back if we may. We're expecting an announcement from Mercury Control. It ought to be on the retro firing.
All right, fine. Walter, back to you at Cape Canaveral.
We'll come back to you. We had an announcement, our signal flashed here that an announcement was coming from Mercury Control from Lieutenant Colonel John Powers. We'll interrupt just as soon as that comes. This is Mercury Control. Our California station has made contact with the Friendship 7 spacecraft at 2:18 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. At 2:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the retro rocket firing sequence was initiated in the spacecraft. The retro firing attitude was assumed, and the 3 retro rockets have fired. They've been confirmed by the pilot and by our telemetry here in the Mercury Control Center. John Glenn's comment was it felt like he was going to send him clear back to Hawaii. The retro rockets have fired. The re-entry process will be initiated shortly. This is Mercury Control. As we showed you on that animated chart just a moment ago, with the retro rocket firing, the spacecraft is suddenly decelerated, and as John Glenn reported, it felt like the retro rockets had decelerated him at such a rate it was going to turn him around and send him all the way back to Hawaii, which would have been some 800 miles almost back along his course. But the firing of the retro rockets has taken place. Another one of the critical moments has passed, and the capsule is slowing down. As it slows down a little further, it'll come back toward the atmosphere. Let's go back to San Diego, General Dynamics Astronautics, and Bob Shackney.
We're beginning to hear the voice of astronaut Glenn, and let me be quiet a moment and I'll listen.
Reporting technical data. He is reporting technical data back to his ground observer. This is his heart.
Wait a minute. He's discussing firing something, is he not? No, technical information is still coming through. This is his voice, the signal of his voice, and we're barely hearing him. Now he's still discussing technical information, no indication that he's fired the retros.
It was a while ago that he did.
Technical information still coming through. Can you give us an idea of what it means?
No.
He is discussing technical matters, some small problems apparently, and it doesn't sound like it involves anything significant. Discussing his instrumentation. Now we have other bits of information coming here. Mr. Haas, will you tell me what we've got?
Here is his heartbeat signal converted from an EKG into a visible meter signal.
Tell Danny I've been listening.
Here is his respiration showing that he is breathing.
Tell him I've got information about the retro rocket.
Indicated up here.
Are all indications that everything is normal from all these dials and instruments?
I don't make this kind of an interpretation from here.
Grant Holcomb now has some further information up on the roof of this building.
on the roof, the antenna is picking up the spacecraft as it passes over the area. Just a few moments ago, in listening to the conversation from John Glenn, he indicated that there was certainly no mistake about it when the retro rockets fired. Grant, heard him talking to Point Arguello and the astronaut there, and he said everything seems to be going fine, Wally. Let me listen for just a moment here.
We're going to have to grab it back again. We've got an announcement from Mercury Control from John Powers there that Glenn is returning. He's using precaution as he begins to go through his retro drill, not the retro drill, but the drill for the attitude and position of the spacecraft as he begins to drop now that his speed has been reduced back toward the Earth's atmosphere, the critical point of flight. He has said that he is not dropping his retro rocket package as early as he might have otherwise. He is retaining it until he's over Texas, but he hasn't clarified exactly why he is taking that protective action. Incidentally, there is no danger in this package being dropped anywhere because it'll burn up, it's at least supposed to burn up, in the atmosphere as it drops through. Because of the faulty signal switch that he had in his heat shield deployment mechanism, he's holding on to that retro rocket package. Apparently, he still has retro fuel aboard and can still use the retro rockets to slow him even further in his drop into the atmosphere if he feels that heat shield has not been properly deployed. This seems to be the explanation for Mercury Control of this slight emergency procedure that Lieutenant Colonel John Glenn has elected to follow. He is now, at this moment, over El Paso. He passed over El Paso, as a matter of fact, just a minute ago, and should be approaching Houston, Texas. He should be over Houston, about 50 miles north of Houston, in another 50 seconds or so. He's due across Houston in now about 35 seconds. We expect to be hearing from Mercury Control that he has dropped that retro package soon. He has to drop it at some point in his descent in order to get it out of the way so that the heat shield will be unencumbered to defray the 3,000 degrees of heat that this capsule undergoes in re-entering the atmosphere. Mercury Control, certainly, as we wait for word that the retro package he has felt he can jettison and that the heat shield is deployed properly. In just about 45 seconds, he should be just north of New Orleans. Announcement from Mercury Control is coming up in 5 seconds. Perhaps we'll know more of Glenn's progress in getting back toward the atmosphere then. Mercury Control. Here it is.
The Corpus Christi, Texas tracking station made contact with the Friendship 7 at 2:26 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We are in contact with astronaut John Glenn. As a precautionary measure, we have asked him to retain his retro rocket pack. We have just made initial contact with the Mercury spacecraft at Cape Canaveral, and that's at 2:28 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. On the basis of his present flight plan, we would estimate a landing at approximately 37 or 38 minutes after the hour. This is Mercury Control.
That predicted landing time is according to the schedule throughout. The the question is whether he can retain that retro firing package until he's just about to land, or whether it has to be jettisoned to provide a full flow for the heat shield. It's been our understanding that the package must be jettisoned at some point, and we assume that is still the case. But as you heard Shorty Powers announce just a moment ago, he's going to hold on to that retro package for a while so that he can use it for even further slowing down in case there is some difficulty with the heat shield deployment. It seemed to us here that Shorty Powers' voice was just a little more tense than it had been previously when we heard him just then, although maybe that's purely our own tension beginning to take hold. This is the critical moment after a fantastically successful launch and 3 orbits. The critical moments are coming. He's now approaching the west coast of the United States. He's just about due over Palm Beach on the east coast of Florida, just 120 miles south of us here at Cape Canaveral in another minute. He's approaching the west coast of Florida and is just about over it now. We're expecting an announcement from Shorty Powers at Mercury Control any moment now. Our signal light is flashed again.
This is Mercury Control. Friendship 7 spacecraft is approaching the coast of Florida at this time during his re-entry process. We have advised him that the weather in his landing area involves 1/10 cloud cover and 10 miles visibility. This should not present any hazard at all during the landing operation. He is now maintaining control of the spacecraft using the fly-by-wire system and the manual system as a backup. This is Mercury Control.
Glenn is in control of the pitch and yaw of his space capsule, which means that he can control its attitude as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere, which in turn means that he should have no problem in bringing it down with the heat shield, the broad flat base of the capsule in the forward position, which it must assume. The radar antenna, that big 80-foot dish here at Cape Canaveral, one of the largest movable radar antennas in the world, is picking up the capsule now and following it down the coast of Florida, as you see, out into the Atlantic toward the Caribbean, where it will be splashing down shortly. In another 5 minutes from now, it should be splashing down. The descent actually from the position at 40,000 feet when the first drogue chute appears, and after 10,000 feet when the huge parachute blossoms out to cushion his fall into the Atlantic, takes a couple of minutes itself. So perhaps we'll be hearing from the ships downrange, from Bill Downs down there on the carrier Randolph,
now encountering the atmosphere of the coast of Florida. He is encountering the atmosphere. We estimate that an ionization layer involved in the re-entry process is preventing us from having direct communication with him. This is Mercury Control.
Mercury Control announces it does not have direct communication with John Glenn. That's the first time, as far as we know, in the nearly 4 hours and 50 minutes of this flight that they have admitted they have not had communication with him as he encounters the atmosphere and begins the drop back toward Earth. He passed over the coast of Florida just 2 minutes ago. We should be hearing from the USS Randolph and Bill Downs shortly that they see the first signs of his descent with the drogue parachute opening. That would be approximately, according to our calculations, 3 minutes and 40 seconds from now to splashdown, but there's a full 2 minutes of the slow drop, so we should be hearing something within the next 2 minutes.
The Mercury spacecraft is in its re-entry process at this time. We have an indication that receiving equipment at Grand Bahama Island is receiving beacon transmissions from the spacecraft. we are not receiving any voice communication at this time. On the basis of his present flight trajectory, we estimate that he will land within about a mile of a destroyer associated with the USS Randolph at the end of the third orbit. This is Mercury.
That was Mercury Control. You heard the report. Those ships of the USS Randolph Recovery Force are across the wide path of the ocean there, roughly 800 miles southeast of Cape Canaveral, 200 miles northwest of San Juan, Puerto Rico, somewhat north of that position, Grand Turk, that you see there on the map between Bahama and Grand Turk, right in that area. Anxiously waiting to see if the communication can be established with the Randolph for a report of the, as they call it here, the eyeball. Here we are. Let's go now to the USS Randolph and Bill Down.
Pilot is Lieutenant Frank Ford of Fox River Grove, Illinois. They are now heading around in a circle around the ship. We have not yet seen any sign of the drill parachute, a 6-foot affair that opens up at about 40,000 feet to add stability to the flowing capsule. It is a perfect day here for this kind of an operation. The sky is unblemished. There is on the horizon just a few scattering of clouds. Otherwise, above us and in the recovery area, feeling unlimited. Wind of about 15 knots, about 16 to 18 miles an hour is blowing. We are heading into that wind at about 15 or 20 knots and sailing eastward. On either side of it are the destroyers Noah and Sibling, about 40 miles away. Any test areas that under or overshoot. The basic plan calls for the destroyers to pick up the capsule after the helicopters pick up the astronaut. We are now turning right.
We're going to report here from Cape Canaveral that voice contact has been reestablished with the astronaut John Glenn as he begins his descent, taking a great load off of all of us.
Slightly to the south and cruising in a more westerly direction. The three recovery helicopters are again circling the ship. All eyes are turning skyward. There has been no sign as yet of the Mercury space capsule. We understand that he should be re-entering the atmosphere. We should see the drilled suit very soon now. It's a perfect day, as I said, for this type of operation. The sea is only has about 2-foot waves. It's a beautiful blue Caribbean yachty holiday weather, and highly recommended for vacations, they tell me. We've been standing capsule, the drogue chute should be opening. It is not already opened to our one quarter. And they say that the drogue chute has opened. We are looking directly into the sun. It's practically impossible to see into this bright tropic sun. However, they have spotted a beautiful sight at 10,800 feet. We are still having difficulty spotting it. Have you spotted it through the sun, Mel? No. I have a lieutenant spotter down here. He has not yet seen it. Somebody with better eyes, or at least sunglasses, deeper view than mine, sees that it's a beautiful sight. We have not yet seen it.
confirmed here at Mercury Control that the main chute has opened. The slow descent to the ocean surface has begun. The destroyer is standing by.
The chute has opened. I have yet to see anyone that's on board ship that has spotted the main chute. The rescue copters are still circulating.
Mercury Control has just reported that the landing bag has deployed and that Glenn reports that all the functions are still go. Going under the code name Steelhead, estimates it is 6 miles from the Friendship 7 spacecraft with the pilot John Glenn aboard. This is Mercury Control.
Helicopters have been ordered to the west. It apparently has been a undershoot, if you want to call it that. In other words, the capsule did not fly over the carrier. And the U.S. NOAA, the destroyer NOAA, under the command of J.D. Exum, is reportedly reports to the carrier that the NOAA does have the capsule in sight and is on its way. I know that the boys at the NOAA have a sign out. They got a tape take. And if they recover Colonel Glenn, he'll give us a welcome he's never had before. The competition on this sport, as you know, has been terrific, and particularly as these
Mercury Control. Astronaut John Glenn reports that he estimates 1 minute to landing on the surface of the ocean.
developed that there is a race between the helicopter to get to Colonel Glenn and the destroyer NOAA. And somebody aboard the destroyer said the other day, if necessary, they might throw ketchup bottles at the covers. They want me to have the honor to make this historic rescue. The NOAA would be about 20 to 30 miles straight ahead of us. on the water and is now attempting to make voice contact with the pilot. Landing time is estimated at 2:43 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Maybe an hour. In other words, this was looked like a shot that was considerably short than originally planned. I'm talking to the gunnery officer here. Yes, I'm from here right now. Area, but seems to be a little off. The way it appears is that the vent valve is in the center of the elliptical area of the where the capsule was supposed to come down, and it has come down a little bit off the spot clear of that, about 40 miles off. What's your name? We'll take me to Portland, Fort Randolph. And how long would you say it would be before we can get to see the capsule and get Colonel Glenn back on the carrier? I think it'll take about a half hour for the Hilo to get out there, and possibly 45 minutes he should be back aboard here if everything's going right. Would you get information direct from the NOAA about their recovery operation and what is happening? The ship will, but we won't get it right here where we're standing. The ship will be getting information from the NOAA. Right, well, you have to alert somebody down there on the bridge then and tell them to get this information as soon as possible, because I know everyone wants to know condition of Colonel Glenn and his fate, because we want to talk to him later. I'm quite sure the President of the United States is interested in this one too. Tell us if they can find out Mr. Kennedy would appreciate it.
Let us know that.
I don't know whether you could find out what happened. There's been a certain amount of confusion here. The capsule land is completely on our side over the horizon where the NOAA, the destroyer NOAA, commanded by Captain J.B. Hetzel, is now in the process of racing the Marine helicopters to recover the capsule and get the first look and have the first talk with Colonel John Glenn after his historic 3 times around the Earth in the ionosphere. As I think you know, here's another map.
This is Mercury Control. USS NOAA, broadcasting from the recovery area, has just broadcasted a message indicating, Roger, Friendship 7, understand your condition is excellent. We are not receiving direct voice broadcast from the spacecraft, but are receiving the ship's transmissions. This is Mercury Control.
The helicopters and the destroyers. I'm going to, pardon me just one moment, I'm going to step down and see if I can get onto the bridge, find out more details of what's going on.
The information we get here, and perhaps you've heard some of it in the confusion of the report from both the USS Randolph and Mercury Control, which we were feeding to you simultaneously, seems, adding up all of the facts, seems to be this. The space capsule is down, that John Glenn made the landing quite safely, that the landing was 6 miles or so from the nearest surface vehicle, the USS destroyer NOAA, under the command of Commander Ekstrom. Helicopters have been launched from the NOAA and are on the way out to the space capsule. According to that report you heard from Lieutenant Colonel Powers a moment ago, voice communication between the capsule and the destroyer has been established, but as was expected, there is no voice communication from the capsule directly back to Cape Canaveral over the some 800 miles. The capsule seems to be, however, from that information, in good shape. Glenn was reported as having said on the way down before the drogue parachute opened at some 40,000 feet, boy, that's a real
fireball, presumably meaning the reddening of the heat shield around his capsule that he could see through the periscope at that point. That heat going up to 3,000 degrees, and 3,000 degrees heats the heat shield of the capsule to a red-hot picture. He's down now in the water, seems to be all right. We won't have a fuller report from the Randolph until a helicopter gets out there to him, and that could be quite a few minutes yet. The capsule is made to float quite satisfactorily in a comfortable sea, a gentle swell, as has been reported from the Randolph in the recovery area. The weather is good there. He is in contact, and apparently he is all right for a successful conclusion to the mission. We can't forget that there have been capsule leakages and capsule problems before, so we can't breathe easily until he's safely aboard that destroyer NOAA, which is on the way to him with its helicopters. We'll get that report just as soon as we possibly can. It would appear, however, that this first attempt to put a man into orbited space around the Earth has been successful, and Lieutenant Colonel John Glenn, 40-year-old flying Marine, combat veteran of World War II in Korea, father of two, and the oldest of the 7 astronauts, has successfully completed his mission. We'll be keeping in touch with the Randolph and Bill Downs. We heard him report a moment ago he's going down to the bridge from the flight deck of the Randolph to try to get further information from the Randolph's communication facilities with the NOAA. We'll also be listening for information from Mercury Control right here at Cape Canaveral. The Randolph is some 75 miles, apparently, from the recovery area, and there is a discussion from the Randolph, as you heard from Bill Downs, that the shot was short. Glenn came down short of the planned landing area. However, the impact predictors, which are usually fairly accurate, had reported, according to Colonel Powers, just a short while before Glenn re-entered the atmosphere, that the landing should be within a mile of the predicted area. That's the degree of success that MA5, the previous orbited shot, which apparently Enos acquired. And now with Glenn back on the surface of the Earth, or at least on the oceans that pertain there too, let's go back to Grand Central Station, see how New York's taking the news with Doug Edwards.
Grand Central Terminal. Everybody here is overjoyed, I think in a slight state of shock, really. A shock of relief. What's your name, sir?
My name is Oliver Whiting, and I'm a British subject.
That seems rather apparent. What did you think of what America and the rest of the free world did today?
Oh, I've been absolutely thrilled, as I imagine everybody else has here. It's been one of the most terrific scientific events that we've all shared, haven't we, together? And I think in doing it, we realize that science has advanced as never before in our lives, anyway. And also, I think we should realize that it has shrunk the surface of the Earth. And today, when we're living at a time when within a few hours of your airport, you can be anywhere on Earth, it's ridiculous to think of the Earth as anything other than a single unit.
That's right. What brings you to America, sir?
Well, sir, I am the sponsor for the Dale Carnegie courses in the British Isles, and I'm here in connection with that work.
You articulate the English language very well, sir. Nice to have you with us. Could I have your name?
I'm Monica Gilleran, and I'm a science teacher in the Bronx, and I've been thrilled and followed every mile of the trip from this morning.
Did you make a study of exactly the procedures?
Every inch and every scientific fact that was given meant so much to me, and I knew what it meant to the American boys that I have taught.
Did you teach them about it, too?
Yeah, I have.
Everybody's happy today.
Yeah.
Here's a future astronaut. What's your name, sir?
Jocelyn.
What did you think of what happened today with Colonel Glenn?
Oh, that was great.
Well, we all look forward to, getting him back into our clutches, don't we?
Yeah.
Attaboy. It's a great crowd at Grand Central all day long, Walter. I think it's almost as big as it was at blast-off time this morning. Back to the Cape and Walter Cronkite.
By golly, Doug, you're right down the middle of that crowd. Maybe it's not as impressive looking to you as it is to us with that camera on high up in the balcony at Grand Central, I don't think I've ever seen Grand Central Station as packed as that, even when the trains aren't running, which, as we all know, can clog up that station pretty badly.
It never has been, Walter. Believe me, this, as I've said before, is the greatest stationary crowd in all of Grand Central's history. It's been estimated as high, I wouldn't know, but as high as about 6,000.
Right, Doug. And we repeat again that the destroyer Noah had reported that it understood from Glenn that his condition is excellent. Its helicopters are on the way. Let's go to Bill Downs at the Randolph.
Colonel Glenn's capsule was in radio contact with the colonel as he was descending in the main parachute. However, after this radio contact, there has been no further contact in the splash after the splash hit. The Noah now is expected to arrive within the next 5 minutes at the capsule, as will the recovery helicopters from the carrier Randolph. The Randolph is expected to be in the capsule area within the next 45 to 50 minutes. However, Colonel Glenn, we do know, survived the re-entry into the atmosphere. His capsule and parachute were reported open. But we do not have any report of his condition. We don't have any report of his condition after the splash ends. It looks good, and we are on the way, and I will keep you posted. This is Bill Downs aboard the carrier Randolph, 1,000 miles after the mission.
Those crews out there in the Navy Task Force are under the command of Rear Admiral John L. Chew, who is the Commander Destroyer Flotilla 4. His headquarters are right here at Mercury Control Center on Cape Canaveral, from which he is directing that rescue operation. There are 24 Navy ships and over 60 aircraft in specialized units attached to the recovery forces. Many of them have already been released from the assignment, however. They were those at the end of the first and second orbits and in the emergency splashdown zone between Bermuda and the United States, the first and second orbits being 500 miles off Bermuda to the east and to the south. Now, at the third orbit recovery area, it is those forces that we are interested in, and they include one carrier, the Randolph, 2 destroyers, 8 planes, and 3 helicopters. The aircraft carrier being the Randolph, the destroyer, the Noah, which is on the way, 2 the astronaut, as well as one of the helicopters, and the destroyer Stribling, which is out there. The other task force has had more destroyers with them because they were covering a wider area of search. And also, there was more that the thought could go wrong in those particular areas. The rescue operation will now be, as we have shown it to you earlier, as soon as the helicopter or the destroyer gets near, scuba divers will plunge in and swim around the capsule, placing a flotation bag around it that will lift the hatch high enough out of the water so that no water can enter as the hatch is opened, and the astronaut Glenn can emerge, therefore, without any difficulty and any danger of the capsule shipping water and sinking. In the calm seas, there should also be, presumably, no danger of the capsule having overturned in the water and floating in the water neck down, which has happened in some of the research and development missions with the capsule previously, including capsule number 18, which happened to just yesterday in a practice mission. This capsule, incidentally, that Glenn has chosen to call Friendship 7 is Mercury capsule number 13, the 13th of these $2 million capsules turned out by the McDonnell Aircraft Corporation in St. Louis. We're still waiting for word that voice contact has been established with Glenn on the water. We heard only that first report that has picked up here. That was a report of of the NOAA answering the capsule, answering Glenn. The NOAA said, Roger, Friendship 7, understand your condition is excellent, which is a normal acknowledgement message, repeating a message from the original transmitter, in this case John Glenn. Apparently John Glenn told to the NOAA, condition excellent. The NOAA answered and confirmed with understand your condition is excellent. This apparently was a transmission after the splashdown, although that wasn't made absolutely clear. John Glenn's flight was 4 hours and 50 minutes in orbit, and then some 16 minutes of the parachuted drop into the splashdown. While this is a pure speculation on our part, and I don't really know that these are the physical laws that govern in this particular case, it's just possible. And incidentally, there's a picture of the students at Muskingum College and some of the townspeople in the Muskingum College gymnasium at New Concord, Ohio, the hometown of Lieutenant Colonel John Glenn, who are anxiously waiting, as is the rest of the world, word that he is indeed safe and that he has been recovered from the capsule and brought aboard the destroyer. As I was saying, I couldn't swear that this is the case, but it may be that holding on to that retro package as long as he did before jettisoning may have altered the downward course of the capsule in such a way as to bring it down in this drop zone a little bit short of where the recovery vessels were standing by, and where the impact had been predicted by the high-speed and most complicated calculators and computers at Cape Canaveral and the Goddard Space Center at Beltsville, Maryland. Here under the palms, which are showing the high gusting winds here at Cape Canaveral, you see that great 80-foot dish, the radar which tracked the final moments of John Glenn's flight. Again, that a little earlier, that John Glenn had put in for his flight pay of 4 hours a minimum per month, to which military pilots are entitled. According to my figures, he was entitled about $212 in flight pay. Another expert comes along, or an expert, I should say, comes along here and suggests that his flight pay is $245 for the flight. So he made the magnificent sum of $245 for this trip around the Earth 3 times today. That's 81,000 miles at $245. You can figure out what it comes to a mile. Pretty cheap travel, anybody's standard. Pretty cheap pay for such travel at any rate. He receives as a lieutenant colonel with 18 years service in the Marine Corps a base pay and allowances of something like $1,149.68 a month, including the $245 flight pay. Here at Cape Canaveral, there is considerable tension as we await that word without which no one can rest, that John Glenn is safe in his capsule and then safe aboard the destroyer. The fact that the destroyer Noah is picking up Glenn instead of the aircraft carrier. The aircraft carrier is some 60 or 70 miles away, will undoubtedly delay a direct voice report from Glenn to all of us back here stateside. He will have to return to the carrier, the Randolph, in order for him to reach the facilities that have been set up to hear him. We have now been told that Glenn has been instructed to remain inside the capsule, not to attempt exit the capsule in either of two ways. He can blow the hatch. With some 68 bolts that hold it in place. Those bolts are all tied together with a small explosive charge, and he can trigger that explosive charge, blowing the hatch clear of the capsule and come out the same hatch we saw him some 9 hours ago enter. Just exactly 9 hours ago this minute, he entered that capsule. He would climb out in the same fashion. The only danger in that is that the sill of the hatch is just barely over the surface of the water, and if there's any wave condition at all, it can begin shipping water, and this heavy capsule can go down, as Gus Grissom found, in a matter of seconds. The other way he can go out of the hatch, and we should understand that he's lying in that hatch, in that capsule, assuming that it is in its proper upright position. He's lying on his back, as he did atop the gantry, atop the rocket before takeoff. He's lying on his back there. Now, if he chooses, he can remove a third of the instrument panel in front of him, push that out of the way back into the capsule. That permits him a very narrow entrance into the nose of the capsule. And once in the nose of the capsule, he has to push out some other material, an extra parachute, for instance, that is there. And he pushes a raft ahead of him, too, and he goes out the narrow neck of the capsule. That is the other means of egress he has. However, since the misfortune with the Grissom capsule, we have this new system of recovery with the flotation bag to be attached by 3 scuba divers, which we have reported, lifts up the capsule high enough so that the hatch still clears the water by an ample proportion, and the capsule remains dry while the astronaut comes out that way. He then has the rather large flotation bag, this donut around him. He can step on that. He remains perfectly dry, theoretically, until the helicopter comes overhead and lifts him free. That flight pay of $245 that we figured out for Glenn, my trusty assistant, Mr. Sokolov, informed me.
Mercury now comes to reports from the USS Noah. Indicate the Friendship 7 spacecraft was picked up clear of the water at 1 minute after 3, and finally set down on the deck at 4 minutes after 3 this afternoon, Eastern Standard Time. John Glenn reports, my condition is excellent. They're in the process now of opening up the spacecraft to remove John Glenn from the spacecraft. This is Mercury Control.
And that's the wonderful of the USS Noah. That's the wonderful and happy news, and there's that happy crowd in Grand Central in New York, and they couldn't be any happier than the thousands of workers here at Cape Canaveral and across the entire United States, as we learn that great news that John Glenn is safe aboard the destroyer Noah, and they're waiting to remove him from the capsule, and he says that he is in excellent shape. Those were some rather long moments of waiting, I'd say. This is from Kingdom College Auditorium. Listen to the applause for Glenn there. Down where he was born, where he grew up, where the mayor says they're going to have the darndest parade you ever saw when he comes home. Oh, boy. Those were 17. Well, before we got the news, there were 22 very long minutes while we waited to hear that Glenn was safe. I must say, there's someone in that crowd there mopping his brow. Let's go to Capitol Hill in Washington, Bob Pierpoint. Bob?
We're here in the old Supreme Court building of the nation's capital, where a group of representatives representatives and senators have gathered, with some members of their families even, to watch this historic event, courtesy of CBS's television monitors. We just had a big round of applause as we got the good word that Colonel Glenn is safe. I see there is Senator and Mrs. Muskie. Senator Muskie was recently injured in an automobile accident and had to be practically carried in on a wheelchair to watch this wonderful event here. We also have Senator Church, Senator Case of New Jersey, standing just behind Senator and Mrs. Muskie. Large group of representatives and senators here in the old Supreme Court chamber, where we've all day long been watching this historic event. That's it from the Supreme Court chamber in the Capitol. Now back to Walter Cronkite at Cape Canaveral.
And Bob, to their point, it was exactly 9 hours from the time John Glenn slipped into the capsule atop his Atlas booster rocket here on pad 14 at Cape Canaveral until he was safely aboard the aircraft carrier Noah, although he hasn't been removed from the capsule as yet. Perhaps he has been removed, but the information which has to be relayed from the Noah back to us here has not been received as yet. At least the word is in that Glenn says he is in excellent shape. He is aboard the Noah, perhaps still in his capsule, in excellent shape. As you noted, he was not, from that report from Shorty Powers, in Mercury control. He was not removed, or he did not come out of the capsule while it was in the sea. Instead, an alternate system of recovery was used. The helicopter lifted the capsule with Glenn still sealed inside aboard the Noah. The question that we now are awaiting an answer to is whether or not the Noah is going to steam Glenn back.
They're still maintaining radio contact with the USS Noah. The spacecraft Friendship 7 is on the deck. It was set on the deck at 4 minutes after 3 Eastern Standard Time this afternoon. Astronaut John Glenn reports, "My condition is excellent." He is in continuous contact with the people on the ship. This is Mercury Control.
Well, it sounds as if he hasn't come out of the capsule yet. And it's 3:10. That's 6 minutes since he was on the deck. I suppose the question there would be whether they would elect to blow the hatch, or whether they would remove it, which would take some time, perhaps. But we'll be hearing that report from the Noah very shortly. Meanwhile, nothing but good humor and great delight, great satisfaction and happiness here at Cape Canaveral among all of us who have followed this operation for so long, and indeed among, I'm sure, all of you across these United States. And the same sort of gleeful reaction is already beginning to pour in from points overseas, where our British and our French and our West German friends are all offering their congratulations. They're being telegraphed from heads of states to President Kennedy in Washington, and they're being sent to Colonel John Glenn himself, too, here at Cape Canaveral and to his home in Arlington, Virginia, where Mrs. Annie Glenn and the two Glenn children, 16 and 14, must be indeed overjoyed and considerably relieved. We'll be presenting this continuing coverage of John Glenn's historic adventure throughout the day now, and this evening at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, a special CBS News report on this epical event.
This is Mercury Control.
Announcement.
Friendship 7 spacecraft is resting on the deck of the USS Noah in the South Atlantic. Arrangements are now being made to let the astronaut crawl out the upper neck of the spacecraft onto the deck of the destroyer.
We just lost a camera here. It fell off a tripod on the right of us. Fortunately, it happened at a moment that we'd already completed the safe orbiting of John Glenn through space and his arrival back on the deck of the destroyer Noah. As you heard from Shorty Powers reporting from Mercury Control just a moment ago, they expect Glenn to emerge from, apparently now, from the neck of the capsule. That perhaps will take a little time. That's not an easy maneuver, and it's hard to get through the tiny space that is permitted him through that narrow neck. of the capsule. The capsule itself is only 9 feet high and 6 feet across, as you know. It's not exactly a huge item. It's about the size of a rather large telephone booth. If you think that one's crowded, think about that Gemini capsule that's being built out in St. Louis by the McDonnell aircraft people, the people who built this capsule. They're building one that's just half again as large, but it's going to hold 2 people. Gemini, meaning twins. Gemini, 2 of our astronauts will be prepared to go into orbit in that piece of equipment next year. That's the first for the next really big step forward. Deep slate Mercury control. Here's an announcement. Astronaut John Glenn is in voice communications with the USS NOAA. He has just advised the people on board the NOAA that he will assist in removing a small pressure bulkhead so that he can call up through the narrow upper neck of the spacecraft. This is Mercury control. A little bit of a puzzlement to us here as to why he would choose that rather difficult means of egress rather than come out through the hatch itself, although perhaps blowing the hatch on board the rather comparatively tiny deck of a destroyer may prove to be a little bit difficult. Maybe it faces in a direction where blowing that hatch out would not be particularly comfortable. I don't know. Pure speculation. As we were saying, the next step after the analysis of John Glenn's successful flight will be a flight by Deke Slayton, the second of the astronauts to attempt orbital flight. His capsule is already here and being checked out at Cape Canaveral. The Atlas booster, which will put it into space, is being checked out, and he expects to go perhaps within 60 days. That was the original space schedule, and unless there is something that doesn't seem to be indicated in the earlier reports that we have been permitted to hear today regarding John Glenn's flight, it would seem that he would go about on schedule. After that, we move on ahead into other phases of the space program. There will be an 18-orbit flight around the Earth, a 24-hour one. Another announcement coming. John Glenn has, in fact, come out of the Friendship 7 spacecraft. They are in voice communication and working together to make the arrangements for him to get out of the spacecraft. This is Mercury control. You heard that John Glenn is coming out of the spacecraft about now. We should be hearing more shortly. However, we won't get any direct voice of John Glenn until quite a bit later. Right now, let's go to John Glenn's home in Arlington, Virginia, and to Nancy Hunchman.
Well, of course, Walter, the happiest place probably in the whole world right now is here at the Colonel's home. His wife, Annie, is inside. We do not know exactly how she is because she has told the NASA spokesman, Ford Eastman, that she wouldn't be ready to come out for several months after recovery because after the last attempted orbit, she was all worn out and it was an emotional strain. But if his condition is excellent, I think you can assume that hers is too. The children all afternoon have been ecstatic, both Lynn and David, and now the rest of the school children are around here. They're interested in Colonel Glenn, not so much as an astronaut, but as a great and good friend. Many of them call him Uncle Johnny. And of course, they're all very elated over the good news and could not be happier. And they're waiting here, waiting for Annie Glenn and Lynn and David to come out. We keep hearing little noises, and the curtain is pulled back, and people peek out, so we assume they're coming, but of course, we can't be just sure when it is. They've been having cranberry juice, tea, and coffee all afternoon, and then, of course, at the time of the recovery, we heard that things were pretty tense inside. Obviously, now they're much more relieved. We don't know exactly when Mrs. Glenn will be reunited with the astronaut, but we understand it will be here in Arlington shortly after the 48-hour period. I know that Mrs. Glenn has gotten a new outfit to wear for the welcome home ceremony, regardless of what that is. So I think we still haven't got any word from Ford Eastman, so until we do, I'll send it back to you, Walter Cronkite, at Cape Canaveral.
Okay, Nancy Hunchman. Here at Cape Canaveral, we wait further word as here, this big cake that we told you about earlier is being rolled rolled out at Hangar S for the crew that helped put John Glenn into orbit today. That's an exact replica in pastry of the Mercury capsule to its exact size. That is Henry Honoré Michel, the chef of the Holiday Inn Motel here in Cocoa Beach, Florida, who made that bit of work on his announcement.
The crew members of the USS Noah. He is assisting in the egress by removing part of the instrument panel and a small pressure bulkhead in the upper portion of his spacecraft. Then he will have to push out the empty parachute canister and crawl out through the narrow upper neck of the spacecraft. This is Mercury control.
You heard the announcement that Glenn is aiding his own egress aboard the destroyer Noah. And out here at Hangar S, the workers are gathering around that 980-pound cake that Henry Landworth, the genial innkeeper here, who has been like a father to the astronauts since the very beginning of our space program, had baked to celebrate Glenn's orbital flight. He had a great deal of difficulty, incidentally, as I reported earlier, because he had that cake originally baked in time for the flight on January 27th. He had to rush in a special air conditioning unit to put in the back of the trailer truck in which he had had the cake assembled, and he has kept it under iced conditions ever since. And now he gets this great opportunity to serve it to some of the 10,000 workers at Cape Canaveral who have had a part in this very successful flight. Some 300 of them are technicians on the Atlas booster alone. A couple hundred more who are involved in various phases of the capsule program, and the scores into the hundreds were involved in the tracking and photographic and communications operations here at the Cape. These operations certainly are not simple things. They require the cooperation of thousands. In the fleet of 20 ships out in the recovery area, 15,000 men alone were involved. And in the tracking stations around the world, at 18 tracking stations, including 2 tracking ships, another 400 men were involved. So this is indeed a huge team effort. We're still waiting for further word from the NOAA that Glenn is out of the capsule, but all of the tension has dropped and the spirit of celebration is in the air at Cape Canaveral. His own assurances from communicating to the NOAA from inside the capsule that he is in excellent shape are taken to mean just that there is no further cause for concern or alarm, and we have only now to wait what may be a rather slow return to the deck of the USS Randolph, and a flight from the deck of the Randolph after a preliminary medical check there back to Grand Turk Island, where medical facilities have been prepared, medical facilities that apparently will not be needed except for the routine research check on how John Glenn survived his 4 hours and 50 minutes of weightlessness, his flight at 17,540 miles an hour, and the suffering of more than 8 Gs, 8 times the force of gravity, a force which meant that John Glenn, who weighs in at 160 pounds, would find that he weighed 1,240 pounds at 8 Gs. He says he's in excellent shape. We heard his report throughout. There were the tense moments for his announcement.
Because of difficulties in clearing the way overhead at the upper neck of the spacecraft, crew members aboard the USS Noah have now decided to blow the side hatch and let John Glenn come out that side hatch.
You heard that announcement.
Reports from the USS Noah indicate the hatch is now blown clear. Astronaut John Glenn should be stepping out of the spacecraft any moment now.
As we reported to you earlier, clearing that tiny egress area at the neck of the capsule is no easy matter. A third of the instrument panel has to be removed. The pilot has to squirm his body into that tiny opening and then push out of the opening that has been created with a pressure hatch at the top. He has to push out an extra parachute, push out the life raft before he himself can climb out.